Let's start with the federal debt. That is forecast to balloon to $1.255 trillion by the end of this fiscal year. Looking at the projected public debt charge as a percent of GDP, that's the cost of carrying all that debt. The number for 2024-25 sits at 1.8%. The projected debt to GDP ratio, remember, this is a fiscal anchor that the government has used, is expected to reach 41.9% by the end of this year. A snapshot of the projected federal deficit this year will hit $39.8 billion. That will then drop to $20 billion by 2028-29. And that's actually up from the $18.4 billion that was projected in the economic statement. Once again, that was back in the fall. The federal government revealed $52.9 billion in new spending. That's not including tax revenues. And also important to underscore here that a large portion, as we mentioned, of that new spending will depend on provincial buy-in. So we've got the numbers now, but now the politics, the real work begins to get some of those provinces to sign on to these big budget items. Hundreds of thousands of small businesses, Vashi, have been struggling since the pandemic, as we've heard, and many have even had to close up shop. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business had demanded that Ottawa come up with a plan to return $2.5 billion in carbon tax revenues to those small businesses. Patty Hollenberg owns Chess Piece Patisserie and Cafe in Fredericton, New Brunswick. It really was a dream come true for her 10 years ago when she moved back to her home province and started her from-scratch bakery cafe. Delectable desserts including cakes and other sweet treats, but rising prices on materials and higher labor costs, and even more on heating, has Patty in serious debt. We'll be speaking to her in just a moment, and we'll talk a little bit about what she's been struggling through over the past few years. Let's go back to our tax expert, Tim Cestnick, right now, who's standing by in Ottawa. So let's talk about her case, Patty Hollenberg's case. What is in this budget that would help small business owners like hers?
Well, unfortunately, most of the measures that were introduced in the budget are for slightly bigger businesses, ones that are doing research and development and focused on artificial intelligence and things like that. But if you're talking about the average mom and pop shop or small business on Main Street in Maine, a small town in Canada somewhere, there's not a whole lot. There's one measure that I think does help. It's the Canada Carbon Rebate, which we've been talking about. This is a promise by the government to actually give back to small business owners some share of the carbon tax that they're collecting. Now, really, how much of a difference is this going to make? There's about 600,000 businesses across the country that expect to get something from this. And if you do the math on it, it's probably somewhere between $2,000 and $4,000 a year in money that's coming back to those businesses as a rebate. Is that going to make a really big difference for some of these businesses? Not really. You're talking about $200 to $400 a month. That's not really enough to employ a second person or defray the cost of rent or anything else. So I'm not sure how much Patty's going to be happy about that. The other thing that does apply to small business owners, which may help, but it's not going to help her in the immediate term if she's struggling with debt, for example. There have been improvements to the lifetime capital gains exemption. Now, what that means is if you have a small business and you sell it at a profit later, up to about $1 million of that profit or gain has been sheltered from tax using this exemption. That's been bumped up to about $1.25 million now. Again, it only applies if you sell your business or you transfer it to the next generation. And there's one other new measure that the government has introduced called the Canadian Entrepreneurs Incentive. What that does is it reduces the tax rate on any profit or gain on the sale of your business or on a transfer to the next generation or upon your death. It's not going to eliminate tax, but it helps a little bit. Those things only really matter if you're actually selling your business or transferring it. So that's pretty much all there was in this budget for smaller business owners.
Back to the point of the capital gains measures, the changes to those, Tim. How do you think this news is going to land?
It's not going to make a big difference, really. Honestly, the exemption has been a little over $1 million now. It's going up to $1.25 million. That's going to save the average, business owner, if they sell their business, it's going to save them another $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in tax. It's not going to move the needle one way or another. I think people will be generally disappointed there isn't more in this budget to really help grow small businesses and really, because small businesses employ 2/3 of the employees of this country. We want to do something to help them grow. Those measures don't do that. And even the carbon rebate really doesn't do a whole lot for these businesses.